Ethan, Trumain Carroll had a lot to say, and I'm rubbing my hands on this one because everyone who has watched the USC show here at the Voice of College Football, whether it was me with Tim Prangley or now this year, everyone knows I was against Benny Wiley. I wanted Benny Wiley out of here. And USC tossed him, so that's great. And so, I'm excited about what Trumain Carroll, Coach Carroll at USC, it just feels right. I'm excited about what Trumain Carroll is bringing to the table. He's talking a little bit about what's new, the new regime. Ethan Inman, lay it out for everyone watching here at the Voice of College Football.
Yeah, for sure. I'll kind of just share some tweets that I saw about Trumain Carroll. This one's really interesting. The first day Trumain Carroll took over as USC strength and conditioning coach, the team was supposed to run half-gassers, but he didn't like their warm-up. So they never made it to the official workout for the simple reason that how you do one thing is how you do everything. So basically in this situation, Trumain Carroll, they were warming up and he didn't like it. So they basically spent the time, around, I think it was around an hour that they're going to be running half-gassers to teach them how to warm up correctly. He's really setting the foundation, at even, the most kind of even the most foundational parts of this program and how he wants it to run. Another one, he set the policy that the team has to earn the right to run the stairs inside the Coliseum over the summer. It's such a sacred place. I didn't want to disrespect it by coming in before we were ready. He explained, again, similar idea. He's, not really taking anything for granted here, not really taking any details for granted at all. He wants, to see a certain level of performance out of USC in their workouts before he lets them run the stairs of the Coliseum, which you would think running the stairs of the Coliseum, that actually sounds pretty difficult and not something that players would look forward to. But now he's made it an incentive. That's how, kind of on top of it, he's been there. Then some Lincoln Riley comments on Trumain Carroll. He said he's really impressed with the conditioning level of his team coming out of the summer. He noted the improved discipline within the team and credited Trumain Carroll for the improvement in both of those areas. And then finally, there was one more a little bit further down here. I believe it was from Keeley. Yep. USC gained 800 pounds of muscle and lost more than 550 pounds of fat from January to July per Trumain Carroll. The foundation that was laid before I got here was a great foundation. I'm here to help enhance it and take it to another level, he said on Wednesday. So just a lot of different stuff that he said here. I don't know, seems like a really detail-oriented guy, which I really like. He's, setting the culture from day one. We've obviously talked a lot about how 2026 is key. You can't really blame him if things don't go super swimmingly this year just because he's, on a bit of a shorter clock than normal. But he's not wasting any time. He's getting in there in 2025. He's setting the stage. He's, instilling kind of a culture from day one. He wants them to work really hard. He wants them to earn everything. He wants every single detail to be as, up to standard as possible, loving all of that. And then, just obviously some other notes here and there about where USC's at physically and stuff like that. But Matt, what's your thoughts on kind of all this from Trumain Carroll?
He's a man with a plan. It's pretty clear that he has a very well mapped out idea of what to do and what to achieve. And, keeping in mind that he hasn't had all that much time on the job. I mean, he speaks with an authoritativeness that indicates he knows exactly what he wants in terms of culture. So it hasn't been a massive uphill struggle for him to communicate the basic messages and core principles to his players that he wants to. I see a very impressive leader, and Benny Wiley. Toss aside the mediocre results, I never got the sense that he was similarly authoritative in creating a culture. And a lot of people chafed at the notion that Benny Wiley was this finesse coach. He advocated yoga for athletes, but there was never the sense that he was really driving the ship in terms of setting the highest possible standard for USC's program, because he was always one of Lincoln Riley's boys from Oklahoma, and that the two were joined at the hip. And I think the thing we need to remind ourselves of with Trumain Carroll, this is not one of Lincoln's guys. And it's part of the reality at USC, the necessary reality of, Lincoln, you have to give up your boys. You have to go outside your family, your inner circle, and bring on the best. Because, with Alex Grinch was obviously another classic case of this, that one of Lincoln's boys, Lincoln being loyal to his guys, held back USC. So this is that outside hire. It's part of the influence of Chad Bowden as well, that, Lincoln Riley is giving up some responsibilities and other people are making decisions. It's not nearly as exclusively Lincoln Riley's show. And I think that can only benefit USC. So I think that Lincoln Riley giving up something as part of his weakened state, and that'll happen when you have two disappointing seasons in a row. Then that leads to Trumain Carroll, who I think is taking hold of this job in ways that Benny Wiley never did. Other aspects of what Trumain Carroll said, and other aspects of what he's doing that you're looking at, Ethan Inman.
I think, just another brief note, I think it's kind of interesting and cool. Like you talked about him as like a very authoritative leader. I think it's really kind of cool to see him and Chad Bowden both are just so well-spoken and like you said, they have a plan, and they also just seem to be very passionate about, and that comes through very, very easily, obviously. Like it doesn't seem forced. It doesn't seem difficult. It doesn't seem inauthentic. They just love football, and they love, leading these young men into being the best they can be, and they want to win, and they're sparing no detail too. They seem very detail obsessed, and you could call both of them obsessed with football, I suppose. So they seem very personality aligned, which I think is really interesting. I also think that, I think if you're Trumain Carroll, it's almost a bit of a risk what he did day one, in terms of like, you're trying to set your relationship with your players, especially in this age of college football, where you're really it feels like a lot of coaches are really just tiptoeing around their players, trying not to scare them off into the transfer portal the next year. It's so much harder to retain players now than it's ever been before, when, it was more difficult to transfer and there was less NIL involved and all that kind of stuff, and just in the era we grew up in too, like some players don't respond as well to such like a disciplined and kind of hard-nosed coach as Trumain Carroll seems to be, but he wasn't afraid of that. And I think part of that is, he saw that it worked at Kansas. At Kansas State. USC is a different program than Kansas State is, obviously, but he saw that it worked there. I think it's also partially that's the kind of players that he wants around. He wants the players that are going to respond to that kind of discipline and that kind of like going hard on the players, but for their benefit. And so I think that's all good signs as well. I think if you're a USC fan, that's the kind of players you want to stick around anyway. You want players that are willing to work hard and willing to take constructive criticism and all of those things, and willing to really work on the details, if even if those details are really excruciating and seemingly simple, like going back to working on the first day, like coming in and immediately being like, none of you warm up right. We're going to work on this, for the time that we were supposed to be doing other stuff. No, we're going to work on warming up right, because this is, the foundation for everything. You come out here and you warm up before you do anything. So we're going to get that right before we do anything else. So I just think all of that's really encouraging, and it'll be interesting to see. It seems like the players are responding well so far. I mean, Lincoln Riley pointed out that he feels the team's more disciplined, and he feels the team's more, just doing better on the strength and conditioning side of things. So I think, the players seem to be responding well so far. I think the players that you're going to see really separate themselves this year and having roles next year in 2026 too, are going to be the guys that really respond well and, work well with Trumain Carroll and, kind of get into the shape that Trumain Carroll wants them to be in. So I think that'll be something kind of interesting to analyze and kind of another layer of the onion, as you like to say, Matt, in terms of when we're looking at next year, like and just as the season goes on, like who are those players that are separating themselves and have really established a role on this team. Maybe even if players transfer out at the end of the season, like this could be a potential reason why. But obviously that's not a knock on Trumain Carroll. That's more a knock on them, I would think. But just kind of another interesting layer to the onion, I think. But yeah, I really like a lot of what he's doing. I like a lot of what he's saying, and looking forward to seeing how that kind of affects the team.
There's the quote that you have screenshotted, in which people can see, about not disrespecting the Coliseum by coming in before we were ready. That particular quote impresses me in a very specific way. It's a message that says, like, we haven't achieved anything until like we prove it. That kind of the basic message there. I mean, you could kind of twist it in a few different ways, but like that's one very legitimate and I think relatively clear interpretation. Let's not say we're ready until like we really are ready. So like don't get too ahead of yourself. And this is a real contrast to a guy that we all know very well at USC, a guy named Clay Helton. A guy who would do a lot of sunshine pumping. It's going to be great, and optimism. And like, I don't want coaches really talking very optimistically before this season, especially at a program where, you've had 2 straight mediocre seasons. I don't want coaches spending the summer telling us how great things are going to be. I don't want coaches to do their bleepity bleeping jobs and get this program rocking and rolling. And then after you've achieved something, okay, like then you can hand out all the praise you want because you've actually earned it, past tense. You've done something. Like that's what I want to see. And so Trumain Carroll is really in that vein. Like he doesn't think this group has achieved anything. That's not a criticism. It's just the step in the process, the place in the evolutionary arc. USC just hasn't done anything yet, not this team, okay? And that gets to something really important. It's that, of course, we all want to see this team and this program succeed. Every fan base, any team wants to see, the whole operation succeed. But that doesn't mean that, in terms of, we're basically a month before the season, offering a pessimistic forecast doesn't mean that you don't want the program to be good. You just don't think it's going to happen. And it's kind of, I'll believe it when I see it. And that maybe that makes a person a doubting Thomas, but like there's a real and important truth there. We need to actually see in concrete, living color and fleshed, embodied, what progress, what success looks like before we say USC's arrived. USC's going to be a 10-2 team. USC's going to make the college football playoff. And I'm not even saying that I don't think this team's going to do well. I think I'm at 9-3, which is not terrible, but it's not the ideal. So I don't I'm not thinking this team's going to be 7-5 or 8-4. I am not quite sold on this team being 10-2 and being a playoff team. So there's a certain degree of skepticism, but just on a broader intellectual level, like I'm sick and tired of forecasts. Like we need to see concrete proof that things have really changed. This is why, and I don't think, for instance, that Zach Hansen's going to struggle as offensive line coach. I'm actually pretty agnostic on Zach Hansen as offensive line coach. I don't know what to expect from him. Like I knew that Josh Henson needed to go. Like I was pretty solid on that. Zach Hansen, I don't have a strong opinion in terms of predicting what he will do or what's going to happen. But let's just say, for the sake of argument, for the sake of a hypothetical, that I was skeptical of Zach Hansen. it doesn't mean that I don't want Zach Hansen to succeed. And one could draw the parallel to, like, I wanted Benny Wiley to succeed, even though I was banging the drum saying, I thought he needed to go. Like, there are different lanes, there are different silos that we work in as fans, and for Ethan, you and me as public commentators. You can have a skeptical view of a public figure, of an athlete, of a coach, but that doesn't mean you wish that public figure to fail. Like, you think I care more about being right than seeing USC succeed? At Trojans Wire, I make money if USC is great, all right? I get more page views, I get more dollars. Like, I write a 10-item listicle, it's going to be seen by several tens of thousands more people if USC is a 12-1 team compared to if USC is an 8-4 team. So, like, I definitely want USC to be great. But of course, what I want and what I think and what I predict, like, what I think and what I predict, those are even like two separate things. Like, a prediction, is worth a warm bucket of spit. Like, who cares whether someone has this prediction or not? But in terms of what a person even thinks, like, I'm skeptical about this coach, I'm worried about this player. That's just a process of bringing up certain tension points, certain conversation points, certain elements of uncertainty which have yet to be resolved. And so I really, after what we've been through together the last 2 years at USC, I love Trumain Carroll talking about, don't want to do anything, don't want to say anything until we're ready. Like, don't want to puff out our chests or do things until, like, we've actually done something, we've actually made past tense real progress. Like, I love that, and it's exactly the opposite of how Clay Helton handled its business. So, if anyone kind of feels annoyed or a little turned off by this little filibuster, I just want to say, like, I hope this clarifies points that fans often confuse from commentators, especially at a sensitive time such as 1 month before the start of a very important, very intriguing season at USC. That what you want and what you think and what you predict, they're all three very, very, very different things. And so how we view public figures at a certain point in time, it doesn't mean like that's kind of the final verdict or the final judgment. It's more of, does reality reflect that a coach has met, past tense, a certain standard, that the program has met, past tense, a certain level of achievement? And this all is connected to Trumain Carroll saying, let's not get ahead of ourselves. Let's not get ahead of our skis here at USC. We achieve things, we do things, we accomplish things, then we get to puff our chests. Then we get to say that we've done something. I just think that's a very helpful message, Ethan Inman, before we go into a new college football season.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. I mean, I think, I, for one, am an optimist. I love optimism. I love cheering for, the players and the coaches on my team until the bitter end. Like, I agree with you wholeheartedly. I think, as someone who is following the MLB trade deadline very closely, this is, something that comes into focus a lot during this time of year, is like, there are teams that have to decide whether, they realistically think that they can compete for a World Series that year, or if they're, if the more realistic option would be to sell and trade for some prospects and kind of reload for the next year. And it's always really fascinating what teams decide to do. There's always a team that you think is going to sell that ends up buying, and there's always a team that you think is going to buy that ends up selling. And it's just like, I think of the Mets a couple of years ago as a great example of a team that everyone was like, oh, they look like they're competing. And then they're like, we're looking to compete next year. And people were like, what? Like, that kind of totally came out of the blue. But anyways, I think, that's something that I think about a lot. And it's always just, you see players traded, and it's always such mixed emotions, because it's like, oh, like, that's a guy that I really liked, And, I was really rooting for him to do the best, but at the same time, like, I see where the team is going and I see why this is best for the organization. Sometimes you don't see either one, but if it is possible to be like, oh, I was really rooting for that guy in this situation, and I'm really bummed that he had to, be kind of let go, or I was really rooting for this team and I'm bummed that they're having to sell, but I understand why it's the best. So yeah, totally get that to back up your point there. I think it's possible to do a bit of both. It's possible to be in Trumain Carroll's situation and be like, hey, we want to be a team that is in the college football playoff this year. We think I'm going to work my very hardest to be the kind of strength and conditioning coach that prepares the team to do that. But still being honest, like still coming in and saying, hey, day one, like the way that the players stretched was not up to my standard. Like that's, not necessarily the like, oh, I came into the, most rousing review of the USC football program. It's not like, oh, I came into USC and just everything was rocking and rolling already. And I'm just like, our players are the best. And I'm like, I'm just basically like along for the ride basically because everything is going so well. Like it's not, it's a bit of an indictment on where USC's discipline was, where their strength and conditioning was at that point. He's being honest there. But he's also, so it's possible to do both. And I think that that's what we're going to see from him. Because like I said, he seems like a guy who really wants to win, really cares about this program, this heritage. I mean, he pointed out like the Coliseum is something that he reveres. So it's possible to do both. And he seems like a guy who understands that balance for sure.